Hello everybody, this is Ian Griffin with Nyle Dry Kilns, and today we're going to do a controls demo on our NDK Nyle Dry Kiln R, or long story short, Nyle Dry Kiln Retrofit controller. So this controller right here is what we plug on retrofit kilns and things like that. If we have a old kiln that somebody wants to revamp controls or whatever, this is our default. And it can be customized for pretty much any various kiln application, gas, steam, DH. It has a lot of versatility. We're going to go over a bunch of those options and kind of go through screen by screen and showcase everyone kind of what they're looking at. So first things first, this is our main status screen. So when you just walk up to the kiln or remotely access or whatever, this is going to be the default screen. This is going to be what most people are going to be looking at for quick snapshots. You have your active dry bulb and your active wet bulb. And then those are going to be highlighted green, and then your forward and reverse dry bulb and your forward and reverse wet bulb are going to be highlighted blue depending on which one is active, which one is controlling. So when your fans swap direction, your reverse would light up blue, and then that would populate the active wet bulb cell there. If you're running the kiln in manual mode, these white boxes here are going to be how you would adjust your set points. You know, plug your dry bulb in here, your wet bulb in here, and your spray set point in here. So these kilns, these controllers have a separate spray setting compared to a lot of programs will have one wet bulb setting that handles venting and spray. And basically this one does it differently. So what you can do is you can have a little bit of a buffer. So if you want to, you can set your, say, your wet bulb to 100 degrees, and you could have your spray set to 95, 96, 98, and it'll spray up to that point. And that way, if you overshoot a little bit, like if you go up to, 97, 98, 99, you won't hit your wet bulb set point because that will trigger your compressor to turn on if you're in DH mode, or your vents to open if you're in conventional mode, and all that. So that the two set points, I think, gives you the biggest amount of flexibility for trying to have your conditions controlled in the kiln. So up here, we've got our different modes. You can click on this box, and it'll open up a little scroll wheel, and you can pick conventional mode, hybrid mode, and DH mode. So these modes are going to affect how the kiln operates and how the different equipment functions. DH mode is our kind of our old school, our bread and butter. It basically means that your dry bulb is going to control your heat, and your wet bulb is going to control your compressor to remove moisture. And your vents are only ever going to open if you exceed your dry bulb temperature. So if it's running really, really aggressive, or it's really, really hot, and you're spiking your dry bulb above your set point, your vents will open to kind of help cool down the kiln. And your wet bulb is only going to operate your compressor. If you are in hybrid mode, that's going to affect the way the equipment works. It's going to change it so that your compressor runs on a heat call as well. So it'll be running earlier on in the cycle a little bit more, and it increases your ability to pull moisture at that level. It'll also change it so that you'll vent based on a wet bulb, kind of like a conventional kiln. So your compressor is going to be running a lot earlier on to help remove moisture, and it generates a lot of heat to help get you up to temperature. And then your vents will kick open to remove moisture as well. This would be basically a really good mode for really fast drying products early on in the cycle. Any kind of softwood, poplar, stuff like that is when you would typically use the hybrid mode, where you're just, the water removal rate is so critical. And then we have our conventional mode here. This basically takes the compressor entirely out of the equation. The kiln will operate like a conventional kiln, where you just heat up and then you vent based on your wet bulb to remove moisture. So those are basically the three modes this ships with. We're going to throw it back into DH mode just for the remainder of the controls demo. So over here on the right, we've got our various tabs for equipment status. They're all orange right now because they are on standby. So we've got our heat, our fan, our vent, our spray. This empty spot, if it was enabled, we would have an HRV, which is a heat recovery vent. And then our compressor is on standby, and our blower is on standby. So when we start up the kiln, these will turn green when they're working. As we go through the tabs, we can turn them off manually, and then they'll light up, I believe, either yellow or white. We'll have to double check. Should know off the top of my head, but I don't have everything memorized, unfortunately. We've got our cycle stop and runtime. So when you start up the kiln, it'll start this box ticking, and then you'll be able to see on a quick glance how long the kiln's been running. And then this right here is your lot ID. We'll go a bit more in detail about that in a minute because it's really important for your log files and data collection and things like that. But we'll start going through some of these tabs one by one. We'll look at the individual equipment tabs and we'll go from there. So first things first, we're going to start with advanced settings. Now this is going to have, again, another box for your lot ID. It's going to have your probe setup. If you have various types of RTDs or electronic sensors, you can swap between them. You could change the kiln to run based on, you know, what fan direction. If for some reason you wanted to control the exiting side of the airflow for your temperature, you could do that. That's a very rare situation. It's usually much more typical that you want to control the entering side of the air as it goes into the lumber. But this does give you the option if you wanted to. These are all lit up white, and we can change all of these to read off opposite fan direction and average or forward or reverse and things like that. This is kind of more in-depth stuff. This might not be necessary for a lot of kiln operators, but it does have that kind of flexibility and the ability to swap between different probes if you have a failure or something like that, or you change your type of probe you're using. You have your heater setup, which again, this is something that most customers probably wouldn't mess with. This is how you can adjust your valve times if you're a steam kiln and everything like that. You have your file browser here, where you can open this up and you can look at your log files. You can see what screenshots are saved onto the SD card. I usually recommend people, if you want to kind of mess around with some of this stuff, to just either pull the SD card and plug it into a computer, because it'll just make browsing these a lot easier. So then we'll start going through these one at a time. We got our heat setting. Now, right now we have heat control in auto, but you can put it in manual, which would light it up yellow. And then off should light it up white. Yep. And then if there was a fault, it would light up red here on the main status screen as well. All right, and then the other thing that I do really like about this controller is the dead bands are perfectly visible to the operator. So for anyone that's not familiar, a dead band is basically the buffer between when equipment turns off and when it turns on. So everything takes time to move, you know, actuators for steam, burners take time to turn off and on, all that jazz. So this allows you to control the exact moment that happens. So this one is by default set to -2 for your heat on, and then at temperature for off. So what this means is if you're set to 100 degrees, if you are below 100 degrees, your heat will turn on, and then it'll run until you are at 100 degrees, and it'll shut off, and it'll turn back on again when you're 2 degrees below. So it'll kind of maintain that 2-degree window of your heat being off and on, and then it gives it a little bit of a buffer. So right here, it actually has it plugged in. Off when above 115 degrees, on when below 113. So we could, again, customize this if we wanted to. We could change that to -1. And now it'll turn the heat on when you're below 114 and off when above 115. So it's really important, especially for things like compressors and steam actuators and all that kind of stuff, to have enough of a dead band for the equipment to safely operate. So it's not trying to turn itself off when it's first turning on, or turn itself on when it's trying to shut off, and bouncing back and forth between that. So dead bands can be critical, but the customization of them, especially with things like venting, can give you the operator a lot of versatility. And over here is your ramp setting. You can like turn your ramp on, and you can adjust how long you want to take it to ramp up on your various settings. And then we'll go on to the next one, our fan settings. So right here, we've got our different dwell times and our reversal timers and our implosion time. So this is how often your vents open when the kiln first starts up, to make sure you don't, you know, rip your door off the hinges due to the pressure difference. Your fan dwell is how long the fans are down in between reversals. And then your forward set and your reverse set are how many how long it runs in either direction before it reverses. So that's all completely, again, customizable based on what the facility or the operator kind of wants to do. Although we do recommend not turning implosion time to 0. There have been plenty of documented cases where a really aggressive pressure change with various temperatures all mixing together can suck or blow doors off their hinges. So a little bit of implosion time to give you that buffer as the fans first spool up is definitely always good. There's this button here which allows you to reverse the fans whenever you want. That can be good for testing and troubleshooting. And then if you want to put your fans either off or full forward or full reverse at all times, you can also do that as well. And our vents/HRV. So this screen right here is what I was talking about before, where your vents are on or off depending on your particular settings. So we can come in here and we can edit our dead bands, and we can make it so that your vents say open at 2 degrees above and shut at 1 degree above. So again, we're in dehumidification mode. So we would only want that to kick on when the vents, when we're over temperature. This would be a different equation potentially if we were specifically venting through our, removing moisture through our vents instead of using the compressor. So, but again, you can also have a full open offset. If you have modulating vents, you can change that so they'll open like, hold on one second. So point. Oh, it's got to be between 2. There we go. So now you can make it so that they'll modulate across that range between fully open and fully closed if that's enabled. If you do not have that full open offset enabled on your kiln, if your vents are just fully open or fully closed, then they would just open at 2 degrees above set point and then close at 1 degree below set point. And again, that's all completely changeable depending on what mode you're running in and what you customize your dead bands to be. Go to our spray. All right, and this one functions kind of exactly the same. All these dead bands on all of our equipment, kind of the concept is still the same. You're basically telling the controller the exact moment you want your equipment to turn on versus the exact moment you want your equipment to turn off. So something like a spray system, if you have steam and it's live steam, you're going to have an actuator that may take 40 seconds. It may take 80 seconds to cycle, open or closed. So if you left these both at 0, then you would hit that, you'd be bouncing back and forth across that line where your actuator would constantly opening, closing, trying to maintain that. Whereas if you have a bit of a buffer, like even say 2 degrees, that means your spray will turn on 2 degrees below your set point. Your actuators will start opening up and the spray will start coming into the kiln, and then at set point, they'll start closing down. So this is why at the beginning I was talking about having a separate, a bit of a buffer between your wet bulb and your spray set point. So if you do overshoot a little bit, if you do take 80 seconds for your spray system to close the actuators, then even if you overshoot by a degree or 2, it's not going to turn your compressor on or manually open your vents and remove all that moisture you're trying to put into the kiln. So this is just the different dead bands and the different spray and wet bulb set point just gives the operator kind of a lot of flexibility for how they want to run the kiln, or what product they're using and what it needs. And last, we got the compressor. This tab would be disabled if we weren't in DH or hybrid mode, and it has a very similar concept where you have various dead bands. It has your parameters for when the compressor will run. Basically, you have to be, between 80 and 160 degree dry bulb for at least this particular model of kiln, and then between 75 and 125 degree wet bulb. And then all these temperatures and pressures need to be met in order to operate the compressor. So right now we couldn't get it to run, because if you see these ones are whited out, it's because we're not within those parameters. We're in the 60s for dry bulb and 50s for wet bulb. So we couldn't get the compressor to turn on unless we heated up the kiln quite a bit. And then this will have a pump down cycle. Whenever the compressor shuts off, it'll have at least a 4-minute timer before it can turn back on again. Dead bands do help prevent you from kind of beating your head against that timer frequently, because it's not great for compressors to turn off and on rapidly a lot. So this is one of the biggest reasons that we design our dead bands the way we do, because you want compressors to either be running constantly, or, you know, if they're not being used, to not be running constantly. If they're turning off and on frequently, that's a lot more stress and wear and tear on the compressor than even running them flat out for, you know, 24/7. So things like that are always kind of critical. Your scheduling and your set points are always critical. How your dead bands work are important, and having a good overview and understanding of all of that and what you're trying to do with your product goes a long way. All right, there's one other thing we should go over before I forget, and that's going to be our emailing of log files and logging in. So right here, we've got two options. We've got our email log file and our email heat treat log. I've got my email plugged in there right now. So these options will only show up if you have the Kiln Connect box enabled. So if you ever ended up with one of these controllers and you didn't have internet access, then these would be all grayed out. You wouldn't be able to see any of it. So we'll log in real quick. We'll just showcase that. I'm going to log in under the operator. If you have a NDKr user manual, then it should have the default passwords in that, and you can always contact us as well, either at our business line, or you can go to our website, NyleDryKilns.com, and there is a resource tab where you can download the user manual for any of our controllers and access them from that as well. So once you have this all sorted out, you can click email now, and it would automatically, it would email whatever the current log file is right then and there. You could also have one of these boxes checked, which is auto email when stopped, which means that whenever you hit the stop button on your kiln, it'll send that log file automatically. So if you use that in tandem with your auto increment lot ID number, then they'll work really kind of hand in hand. Anytime you start or stop the kiln, it'll generate a new log file, and then when you stop it, it'll email that log file. So it depends entirely on what the customer wants, but it kind of gives you those options. And I don't think I've remembered to talk about this box last time I was in this menu as well, but shut down kiln when schedule ends. If you have this selected and you're running off the schedule tab and that's all enabled, then when your schedule shuts down and it runs its course, it'll turn the kiln off. Whereas if you do not have this box selected, then it will default to whatever settings are actively plugged in on the main status screen. I think that might be it for the different equipment tabs. Yep, looks like it. So we'll go on to the moisture samples one. So this right here, this allows you to plug in up to 12 moisture samples at kind of whatever you want. It'll average them for you. You can enable or disable various samples, whatever you kind of need to do. And if you're a hardwood facility, you can plug your entire schedule into the screen over here, and then you can have them set up on moisture steps. So you can see right now on these steps, they're timed schedules. So 10 hours until steps ends. But here in step function, we could come here and we could change this to an MC percentage step. And then we could have a moisture content percentage plugged in here. And if we did that, then it'll advance to the different steps based on what numbers we plug into here. So for hardwood facilities, some people are old school. They like to do it, you know, on notebooks or pen and paper, or even like an Excel spreadsheet, and then change their settings manually, which is totally fine. But if you wanted to, then you could have your moisture samples kind of plugged in here and then have a moisture content step. We also have the ability to have these auto-populate with in-kiln moisture sensors. And that is totally functional as well. You can do the same thing, and then it'll auto-populate these. But obviously at that point, your kiln's kind of drying lumber for you. So you always want to be paying attention and making sure that you're getting accurate readings, your probes are all good, and you're getting good feedback for the, you know, the settings to advance based off, good information. So that's basically moisture content steps. We'll go over the trending one real quick before we dive deeper into the schedule. So this trending screen right here, it is going to be blank because the kiln's not actively running, so it's not populating data. But how you would use this is you would be able to click on whatever amount of time you want to view, and then as it populates, it'll fill a little line graph, and you can pause it and then use the slider bar to go back and forth, and then you can look at history of other drying data you've had here. This trending screen isn't particularly user-friendly. Whenever we sell one of these kilns, we sell a Kiln Connect box along with it that has significantly better charting and graphing software as part of the package. This is just the one that comes kind of cooked into the PLC. I might do a controls demo on the Kiln Connect screens and everything at some point as well. I think that would have a lot of value. But for right now, we will go on to the schedules. So these are the various pages. You can have, I believe the default is up to 20 steps as of right now. So we could say change this to 20. And then we could cycle through up to page 4 and get to step 20. And then again, these different steps can all be edited individually. So you can have a step that's in dehumidification mode or hybrid mode or conventional mode. And then you can have it be timed or a heat ramp or something like that. It gives you a lot of flexibility for how you want to build your schedule and what you're trying to accomplish with it. And then you can name it, you can save it and load it through here, and it'll make a various list in your file browser, and you can select. It would just pull up another one of these, and then anytime you want to save a new one, you can basically just type in your schedule name and hit save. Now, it's important to note when you're doing schedule names on this particular controller, this PLC, it has a character limit. I believe it's 16 characters, and there are certain special characters that do not work. I think like dashes or underscores might not work, or no, slashes do not work. So, but I think dashes do. So you want to pick your schedule name carefully, and then you come down here to save it, and then you hit the save icon. And then it'll add it to this list, and you can load it whenever you need it. And the other thing is if it's not enabled, right here, schedule enabled, then the kiln is going to operate based off these particular set points in the main screen, these white cells. If your schedule is enabled, then these will be grayed out, and they will display based on whatever step the schedule is currently in. So we're going to add a little bit more time to a couple of these just so I can demonstrate something else. Just throw 5 hours in there and 5 hours in here. Save. So now when we hit start on the kiln, it's going to ask us two things. It's going to ask if we want to auto increment the lot ID and if we want to auto start schedule. So auto increment your lot ID is this number right up here. If you have this box selected, every time you start a new kiln charge, it'll automatically change it to reading a 3-digit number. It'll say, like, I think NDK3-001. And then the next time you do it, it'll be 002. So it's just kind of a default way to have a new lot ID whenever you start a new kiln charge. I recommend to people, especially if you're dealing with your log files a lot, to change this to something that's going to be easy for you to distinguish. The date and the species or something like that is really, really good. If you have multiple kilns, what kiln number it is can go in there. And that means that if you ever need to go through your list of log files, you can tell just by the lot ID which one you're looking for. Whereas if you auto increment lot ID, it is an easy way to do it, and you can track it that way, but it will just be a 3-digit number, and then it'll reset the next year. And then auto start schedule, if we did not have this enabled, then the kiln would start in manual running off of these settings, but we want this enabled. So we're going to hit confirm and start kiln. So now everything's going to spin up here. Our vents are going to start running in a minute. Our fans are going to turn on. We're getting a couple of alarms. Our wet bulb is over temperature. Oh, it's because our kiln schedule has a bunch of 0-degree settings in it. So let's go in and change that real quick. We'll do it to this one as well. Okay, so now those alarms have gone away because we're no longer wildly out of the parameters like the kiln thought we were for a minute. And you can see these boxes are now grayed out because they're populating from our schedule. So if we go in here and we can see the green step is the one we're actively in right now, but we can use these buttons to skip back and forth. So we're going to skip to step 2. It'll give you a little warning to make sure you want to. And then previous steps will now highlight in orange. So the current step is going to be green, previous ones are going to be orange, and then gray are the ones you haven't come to yet. So right now on step 3, we have no temperature settings plugged into there. So if we skip forward to that step, we should get those same alarms pop back up for being out of temperature spec. So now we come back here. Yep, our alarms are lit up. Wet bulb over temperature. Since this isn't an active kiln full of lumber, we're probably not in any danger. So I'm going to skip back. And everything all looks good. So we're going to stop this. And yeah, that's actually looks like that's about it. There was one other thing after the alarm screen. So yeah, this is just your list of alarms. You know, they'll light up red, flash here whenever you have a various alarm. And when the kiln is running, you also have this pause button. What the pause button is going to do is it's going to allow you to stop all the equipment and physically go into the kiln or whatever if you need to. And it's not going to actually stop the lot ID recording. So if you hit stop and then restart, depending on how your lot IDs are set up, it may count that as a separate kiln charge. So you want to be aware of that. So pause can be useful. It doesn't interrupt anything. But again, this isn't a kiln that's full of real lumber. So we're going to hit stop and just shut everything down. And I think that's everything. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this controls demo showcase of the NDKr Nyle Retrofit controller. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our business line is 800-777-6953. Thank you.